Disney Channel shows have been some of the best animated adventures in the past few years, with animated juggernauts like Gravity Falls, Star vs. the Forces of Evil, DuckTales, and plenty more adventure-driven shows in their repertoire. It's no wonder that this channel has managed to keep up with the competitors. But then I was introduced to Disney Channel's latest animated program, the Ghost and Molly McGee, and after the first few episodes, I came to realize that this show was not at all what I expected. I'm a reanimated corpse named Channel Hopper, and this show made me truly feel alive once more. The first episode opens up to a very ghastly world of ghostly characters passing judgment on the performances of certain specters, as it's established that each spirit is tasked with spreading misery throughout their respective cities. Failure at the task at hand will result in the ghost being sent to the flow of failed phantoms, while others simply continue on with their business. Wait, so that's the afterlife? You're telling me that life after death is nothing more than an endless job? Do all ghosts have to do this, or is it just a specific class of ghosts? Dear God, is this what's waiting for me at the end?
I have so many questions!
But moving on. This brings us to our first titular character named Scratch, who, despite his success, doesn't make him a favorable individual to socialize with among his peers. Thus, the character is left to sulk in his own loneliness in the town of Brighton. But all that changes when a new family moves to town and into Scratch's home. We're introduced to the McGee family, consisting of Peter, Sharon, Daryl, and our second titular character, Molly McGee. Molly is an optimistic and happy-go-lucky spirit who likes making new friends and always looks on the bright side of things. Upon first arrival at their new home, she finds out that the house is already occupied by the antisocial Scratch. Being the carefree spirit that she is, Molly is thrilled by this discovery, but Scratch isn't too pleased about it and curses our lead character only for it to backfire on him, as he is now stuck with her unless he can scare her out of the house. Already this show is off to a good start, as the characters are pretty enjoyable to watch for all different reasons than previous Disney shows. I mean, Molly McGee at first seemed like a copy and paste of some of Disney's other characters like Star, Butterfly, Mabel Pines, and even Wanda to a certain extent. However, upon further examination of the character in later episodes, I found her optimism to be quite tolerable to sit through. As previous characters radiate with positivity and optimism in the beginning only to realize that the world isn't all sunshine and rainbows, Molly, on the other hand, isn't always optimistic as a character trait, but uses optimism more as a coping mechanism. This stems from her past experiences of constantly changing locations, leaving behind old faces for new ones. This is actually a refreshing take on the direction that the show seems to be heading. Molly wants to make friends with everyone she comes across because she's never had someone to stick by her side for long, whereas Scratch doesn't want to put in the effort to make friends, as no one ever wants to be around him. This creates an interesting dynamic between our two leads because they don't have to stick together, but they want to stick together. And this isn't just something that happens overnight, as we see they take small steps here and there to get acquainted with living in the same house together, and we're given some clever insight into their family's Thai heritage, to which our fifth family member, Grandma Nin, explains, and Scratch is more than thrilled to take part in. Molly gives Scratch his own living space and promises to leave food offerings for him as a means to compromise their living arrangements. As for the rest of the family, while they were scared of their ghost host at first, they quickly become well acquainted with their ghostly friend thanks to their own unique personalities, seemingly accustomed to his type of shenanigans. Episode 1 was a perfect start for the series, and later episodes seem to be centered around Molly and Scratch setting out to make their town of Brighton more peaceful or miserable than it already is, with their first stop being Molly's new school. Upon her first day, Molly meets some new faces, with the first being a shy and socially awkward girl named Libby, and her first obstacle in a new town in the form of the popular girl of the school named Andrea Davenport. After stumbling on Andrea's name, she instantly becomes the most avoidable student in the school, with Scratch enjoying every minute of it as her failure in a social setting means he gets his house back to himself. This episode, as well as a lot more to follow, manages to incorporate a familiar transitional tour during the conflict and resolution portion of the story in the form of a musical montage, which I haven't seen implemented in a cartoon since Phineas and Ferb. While not the most memorable songs, they do provide adequate pacing for the segments and showcase some interesting visuals in the series. The scene eventually leads to Scratch scaring Andrea into fainting and shenanigans ensue, leading to Molly being put in a bad light until Scratch has a change of heart and helps her out, thus fixing her first day of school and the school life of Libby as well. Later on in the series, we eventually come across more details about the side characters and are even introduced to a dim-witted ghost named Jeff, spelled Geoff, who considers Scratch to be his friend while the latter could care less. Wow, he actually does have a friend. Who knew? Each episode takes a simplistic approach into making the community a better place, from having the McGees volunteer at restoring public locations, competing in softball teams, or simply taking care of everyday household expenses. However, these little moments seem to be having an effect on the town of Brighton as misery starts to decline, thus the Ghost Council starts to take notice and inform Scratch that he better fix it or face the consequences. This actually brings up an interesting dilemma between Molly and Scratch. Both characters have conflicting end goals of making the town a happier or more miserable place to live. They don't want to cause problems towards the other one, but it seems that can't be avoided now, as Scratch has to sabotage the town's turnip festival or risk it making the town more joyful and thus condemning him to an eternity in the flow of failed phantoms. While successful in his goal, albeit not directly, we see this isn't a total loss for the town, as the publicity from the festival did bring some business to a local lodge motel, increasing the happiness in the area just by a small amount to catch the council's attention, but not enough to be concerned about, meaning that Scratch is free for another day. I really like the idea that community and unity isn't achieved through one major event in the town, but through small good deeds that eventually brings everyone together slowly, thus making the show a bit more grounded in reality, as not all ideas go according to plan. Another aspect of the show that surprised me was how we see Scratch and Molly's characters start to influence the other one's actions, by Scratch learning to be more caring about others, while Molly learns that not everything can be solved with a smile or a hug. Thus, she's willing to be a little mischievous at times when trying to fight for what she believes in. I know I've talked about these two more often than any other character in the show, but that's not to say that I hate them. In fact, Libby is by far my favorite character in the show. She's a kind and timid girl who likes turtles and has both a Hispanic and Jewish heritage. She's also not a fan of large social gatherings, similar to Fluttershy in many ways than one, but she's always a loyal friend with a multitude of hidden talents. She's always very intellectual at times and often keeps Molly grounded in reality. Next up is Andrea Davenport, and just like Molly McGee, the execution of her character surprised me, as she wasn't all what I expected her to be. At first, her character led me to believe she was an egotistical and spoiled high school popular girl, and while she is all that and more, it doesn't necessarily mean she's a bad person because of it. She's still nice in some ways, and most likely we'll see more of that in later seasons. Next, we have the rest of Molly's family, and they're quite a cast of characters. We have the mischievous little brother named Dale, who I have to admit is pretty funny when it comes to his schemes. Then we have the father, Peter McGee, who I don't know much about, but he seems to be a nervous wreck at times, and he simply wants to support his family. And lastly, we have Sharon McGee and Grandma Nin, who seem to have a rough relationship involving Sharon's art career. With such fun characters and an interesting storyline, the quality of the show must be top-notch in order to stand out. The animation is definitely a spectacle when it comes to Scratch and his over-the-top facial expressions combined with the distorted color backgrounds. As for the human characters, they have a smooth and warm design, which is good but not too impressive. The music in the series is upbeat and showcases the town's synergy, but I wouldn't call it memorable just yet. As for the humor in the show, it is by far some of the best, with its clever wordplay, observational humor, slapstick, and clever visual gags. I mean, they can literally show mortality on screen in a kid's show while still being funny. Overall, the Ghost and Molly McGee has not only exceeded my expectations, but have opened the door for more Disney shows to return to a more episodic format instead of making animated programming more serialized in order to appeal to a more adult audience. The characters are compelling to watch, and a lot of the material that makes the show stand out are very reminiscent of classic Disney cartoons like Phineas and Ferb, Fishhooks, and even Nickelodeon shows like Danny Phantom. Each character, while simplistic in their design, has an interesting trait that well defines their motivation and struggles in the series. I can expect great things out of this show and look forward to watching more. With all that said, I plan to talk more about the show and the characters later on, so be sure to hit that like and subscribe button for more videos, and be sure to leave a comment down below. I'm your Reanimated Corpse channel hopper, and unlike these ghosts, I don't plan on being a failed phantom anytime soon.